What struck me the most about landing in Perth was the beautiful Aboriginal art walking through the airport, and there is the walking escalators that you go through to get out of the airport, and you'll look to the right and you'll look around and you'll see all this Aboriginal art. A taste of what a 50,000-year-old tradition can offer, and yet the trustees of this tradition don't really seem to have benefited from the inflated riches of a modern economy of Western Australia, which is historically the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. Obviously, America might have something to say with that, but I mean they revolted. They're very much their own entity. Whereas I feel like there is still this lineage with Britain. We still have the Ashes tournament, and people are still interested in cricket, and it's still a big, not even rivalry, but connection. And walking on the streets of Perth, you can see the street art. It's beautiful. As for the Western Australian nightlife, it is terrible. And I'm happy it's terrible. To say it's terrible is platitudinous. Of course, the nightlife in Perth is bad. You don't need to develop your nightlife when the days are so rich, beautiful, and relaxed. Northridge, Perth is the young, exciting part of the city where there are clubs and bars. However, these bars, even on a weekend, close at, say, 1, 2 a.m. So if clubbing is your heartbeat, your hobby, your passion, I'd leave Western Australia to another lifetime and go to Europe. Being in Australia, Western Australia has made me realise that Europe does have, even now that it's been decimated by what is a impending financial depression, some of the best nightlife globally, and obviously living in it and growing up in it, you don't realize that you take it for granted. The first experience of a Western Australian beach I had was in Leighton, Fremantle, which is the best beach I've ever been to. Better than the ones in Jamaica. In Jamaica, you're probably going to get hassled by someone trying to sell you weed. And there is something unkept about the Jamaican beaches that I've been to. I'm sure there's some nice isolated private beaches in Jamaica that I am too much of a peasant and non-asset holder to frequent. But Leighton Beach is nice. I went in the sauna and to the Indian Ocean during my time in my session in the sauna, which was class. The water's so fresh. It's crazy. Then skirted around to the rest of Fremantle, which is a different area than Leighton Beach. And Fremantle's more of it's not seaside town in the terms of you'd expect from Britain, but it is a seaside area of Perth. And it's where I got a fish and chips. Barramundi was the local fish. Barramundi is a fish that is quite salty, and this is going to sound dumb, but it tastes like the sea. It's quite fishy rather than a clean taste. It's an Asian sea bass, and it's quite common in the areas around here, and you'll see it in the shops and the local grocery stores. The ice cream was world class. I got like a honeycomb, I think, and vanilla ice cream. It's up there with the gelato in Italy. It really was absolutely sublime. I was in good weather. I was chilling. I was relaxing in Fremantle. It's up there with the ice cream in Parkgate, the UK, which is one of my favorite ice creams. When you get to that level of dairy, you're really splitting hairs. It's not, is it nice? It's what do you like? What does the individual, the experience mean to you? You know, what do you like? Do you like a heavy one with heavier cream, stronger flavors, weaker flavors? better cream, or that they use better quality cream. It's really up to you. But most of my evenings were spent in Asian noodle restaurants. Australia's next to Southeast Asia, and there's a big Southeast Asian community in Australia who have imported their food, and we've got Chinese noodle soups in the UK. We've got good Asian noodle soups in the UK, but my passion was started by a Chinese noodle shop in Birmingham called Danzu Noodle Soup, which is the best Chinese noodle soup that I've had. They've got one called Lanzhou Noodle Soup in Northridge, and it's good. I mean, you're looking at $18, $19 for a soup, which is basically works out at £9, and it was feeding me for the day because I wasn't training. I'd have one meal a day, and I'd eat there, and it was a top quality meal. I'd have it in the evening about 6 o'clock. The best place, obviously, is Birmingham. Everyone's there. Go there. It's incredible. It's in Chinatown. And similarly, you're going to pay a bit more because it's in the UK, but it's a cheap place to eat that is 10 out of 10. It's one of the best restaurants I've been to in Birmingham. And that includes the fancy French restaurant places that people addicted to these sorts of videos go to. You should be really outside exercising or texting your mate, but you're here. The best ramen that I've ever had was a place in Northridge called Tonkatsu Ramen, and they specialize in toripatan style ramen, which is my favorite ramen. Whereas this sort of ramen, it has a rich, creamy chicken broth, which they must boil the chicken skeleton for hours, and then they must have some sort of blending process and then filter it, because this broth is so thick. It is the best ramen I've ever had. I'm making the distinction between a ramen and a noodle soup, a Chinese pulled noodle soup, but the best ramen I've ever had is in Perth. So when people move to Perth, the big dream that they have is working in FIFO, stands for fly in, fly out. And it's essentially a mining schedule where you go to these mines and you do quite rudimental jobs because the hours are so intense and long, and the pay in Australia is respectable. I was going to say good, but it makes a change that people's energy and life isn't being exploited. You get a real perspective of the immigrant's rationale when they come in. I mean, the Irish guy who I met in my hostel was talking about how the Australians love getting FIFO workers from abroad in because they're paid by how much they're drilling, whereas the Australians will get paid like a set rate and it's non-incentivized, which there's an irony about that, because it was one of the things that annoyed me about the UK, that we've allowed this narrative that immigrants work harder and are better and more efficient workers than native populations. But after spending some time within those immigrant populations in Birmingham and now Australia, it's just a game of who's willing to be exploited more and whose origin country is shithole. And I'm speaking that as an immigrant in Australia. Met another guy, he was from Oxford, mixed race gentleman, told me he was a drug dealer, and he came to Australia to stop selling drugs because he had a license to operate a digger and he could get a lot more money out of here. These people are earning upwards of £50,000 and they're able to get a place to stay that isn't with another member of their family and live, go out, have a couple of days. And that is the threshold. And it just told me that it just typifies reality. What you come to realise is that life is truly simple and it's not as complex as they're telling you or they're trying to sell to you. And that in order to be successful, sometimes you have to be in the right place at the wrong time. Or the wrong place at the right time. But it doesn't always require 3 years of study and 9 years to have a successful life. It while back in Australia, digging rocks and making the roads and stuff. They've got all this infrastructure in these modern colonies that